"Look at me," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I gave you 15 years of my life." He laughed, a short, dismissive bark that echoed off the marble floors of the penthouse I had decorated. "And those 15 years," Richard said, adjusting the cuffs of his ridiculously expensive suit, "have worn you out, Elizabeth." He picked up his briefcase. He didn't even look back. He just left. For her, the 25-year-old intern from marketing. That day, the old me, the supportive wife, the silent partner, the woman who smoothed over his mistakes and hosted his dinners, walked out that door with him. 12 months later, when my doorbell rang, the man standing on the other side didn't even recognize the woman who answered. Have you ever looked at your own life, a life you meticulously built, and realized you were just a guest in it? That's what the first day felt like. The silence in the penthouse was deafening. He was gone, and with him the illusion of my life. Richard Vance wasn't just my husband, he was my project. When I met him, he was a mid-level manager with sloppy ambition and no follow-through. I was the strategist. I was the one who read the market reports, who drafted the business plans on our kitchen table at 2 a.m. Vance Global was built on my insights, my sacrifices, my unpaid, unacknowledged labor. I gave him 15 years, and in return, he gave me a severance package in the form of a condescending pat on the head and a notification from his lawyer. The first week was a blur of high-priced attorneys. Richard was generous, they said. He was offering the penthouse, which he knew I couldn't afford the upkeep on, and a stipend. A stipend! Like I was a child getting an allowance. He was locking me out of the company's shares, claiming my contribution was non-financial and domestic. Domestic? I organized his entire corporate life. I vetted his executive hires. I was the one who told him to acquire the tech firm in Singapore, a move that tripled his net worth. And I was domestic? I spent the first month in a fog of grief and humiliation. I cried, I raged, I broke a very expensive vase that I'd always hated. Anyone who has ever been betrayed by the one person they trusted most in the world knows that specific hollow ache. It's not just sadness, it's an excavation. You are scooped out, empty. I sold the penthouse. The memories were toxic, the air too thin. I moved into a small, elegant apartment downtown. It was clean, minimalist, and mine. The first piece of furniture I bought was a large, expensive desk. The second month was for research. If Richard saw me as worn out, it was because I had poured all my energy into his empire. Now it was time to redirect that energy. I started digging, not just into Richard, but into Vance Global. I still knew the company's DNA better than he did. He was the face, I was the brain. And the brain remembers where all the skeletons are buried. I remembered a name, Sarah Jenkins, my old assistant, a brilliant, fiercely loyal woman whom Richard had fired 3 years ago. The official reason was budget cuts. The real reason was that Sarah had questioned Richard's expense reports, specifically the ones involving undeclared client dinners in the Caribbean. Finding Sarah wasn't hard. She was working for a small nonprofit, underpaid and overqualified. We met for coffee. She looked at me across the table, her eyes sharp. "Elizabeth, you look different." "I am, Sarah," I said, sliding a folder across the table. "I need your help." "Help doing what?" "I'm going to dismantle Vance Global." But my real target wasn't the board. It was his upcoming merger. Richard was finalizing a massive deal with Atlas Holdings, a rival conglomerate. This deal would make him a titan. It was his magnum opus, and it was built on a lie. Vance Global's quarterly reports for the last year had been creative. Richard had been inflating the subscription numbers for their new software division, the same division I had conceptualized. He was counting free trial users as active subscribers to make the company look more profitable than it was. It was a classic, desperate, short-sighted Richard move. "He's committing securities fraud," Sarah whispered, looking at the data I'd pulled from an old shared drive I still miraculously had access to. "He is," I confirmed, "but Atlas is moving too fast to do their deep dive due diligence. They only see the top-line numbers. Richard is counting on his charm and their greed to push the deal through before they look too closely." "So we leak it," Sarah said. "No," I shook my head. "Leaking it makes me a whistleblower. It's messy, it's public, and I could be implicated for having the data. We don't leak it, we direct it." My transformation had begun. The grief was still there, a cold stone in my stomach, but now it was surrounded by fire. I stopped looking at old photos. I stopped wondering why. I hired a ruthless divorce attorney, not the placid one Richard's team had recommended. My new lawyer, a shark named Maria, took one look at my file and grinned. "Oh, we're not going for alimony, Mrs. Vance. We're going for blood. We're going for a forensic audit." While Maria buried Richard's legal team in paperwork, demanding audits of every shell company and offshore account, Sarah and I worked on the Atlas deal. I needed an inside man, not at Vance Global, but at Atlas Holdings. I found him, Marcus Thorne, the head of acquisitions at Atlas. I knew from my domestic research that Marcus was ambitious, but he was also meticulous. He hated being played for a fool. I also knew his wife collected rare orchids, and I happened to know a private grower in Hawaii. I didn't call Marcus. I didn't email him.
I arranged to be at the same rare plant auction in upstate New York. I saw him bidding on a Paphiopedilum rothschildianum. I waited until he lost the bid to a tech billionaire. "A shame," I said, stepping up beside him as he sipped his complimentary champagne. "It's a beautiful specimen." He nodded politely, not recognizing me. "My wife has been after one for years." "She has excellent taste. It's the gold of Kinabalu, isn't it? Very rare, very difficult to acquire. Much like," I paused, "accurate data on Vance Global's software division." Marcus Thorne froze. His eyes slowly moved from the orchids to my face. "I'm sorry," he said stiffly. "I don't believe we've met." "We haven't," I said, handing him my new, crisp business card. It didn't say Eliza Vance. It said E. Vance, Strategic Consulting. "I'm Elizabeth, and I believe you are about to make a very, very expensive mistake, Mr. Thorne. A mistake based on fraudulent subscription models. I used to manage that portfolio." His face went pale. He knew exactly who I was now, the discarded wife. "Why are you telling me this, Mrs. Vance?" he asked, his voice low. "Because," I said, looking him directly in the eye, "I hate sloppy work. And Richard Vance is the sloppiest man I know. He's selling you a lemon, and I'm offering you the inspection report." This is the moment that defines you. Not the moment you are broken, but the moment you decide to pick up the pieces and build a weapon. Many people in this situation would just want to expose the truth publicly, but true power isn't about shouting. It's about knowing exactly where to whisper and to whom. I didn't want to just expose Richard. I wanted Atlas to do it for me. I wanted them to use their corporate power to annihilate him. "What's your price?" Marcus asked. "My price?" I smiled. "A front row seat." And I want you to hire Sarah Jenkins as your lead auditor on this. She knows where he buried the bodies. And if I say no, then I walk away. And when this deal implodes in 6 months and Atlas stock craters because you bought a company built on air, I'll be sure to send your wife that orchid as a condolence gift for your career.
Marcus stared at me for a long time. The auctioneer was calling for the next item. "My car is outside," he said. "Sarah Jenkins can start on Monday." I walked out of that auction house feeling the first true warmth I'd felt in months. The 48-year-old worn-out wife had just set a time bomb under her husband's empire. The next 6 months were a masterclass in covert operations. Sarah was embedded inside Atlas, liaising with Vance Global for the merger. She was my Trojan horse. Every evening, she and I would meet. She would feed me the sanitized data Vance Global was providing, and I would tell her exactly which file server to randomly request access to next. Richard was oblivious. He was too busy flying to Paris with Chloe, buying her jewelry, and basking in the media attention of his upcoming triumph. He saw my legal challenges, the forensic audits Maria was demanding, as petty, a nuisance. He didn't realize my legal strategy was just a distraction. It was the look over here trick, while the real execution was happening on his blind side. The stress was immense. There were days I thought I would collapse. I wasn't sleeping. I was living on coffee and adrenaline. But anyone who has ever fought for their own survival knows that you find a strength you never knew you possessed. You become harder, sharper. The old me was truly gone. This new woman, I was starting to like her. She was ruthless. I was also transforming physically. The grief diet had taken 30 pounds off me. I'd cut my long, wifely brown hair into a sharp, silver-streaked bob. I sold all the beige and cream clothes Richard liked and replaced them with tailored, dark, powerful suits. I looked, I realized, like a CEO. The Atlas merger was scheduled to be announced at the annual Vance Global shareholder meeting. This was Richard's coronation. He had booked the largest ballroom at the Hilton. He was flying in press from all over the world. The day before the meeting, Marcus Thorne called me. "It's done," he said. "The audit is complete. The fraud is confirmed. The Atlas board is pulling out. We're handing our findings over to the SEC. "When?" I asked, my heart hammering. "Tomorrow," right in the middle of his speech. I hung up the phone. I sat in my quiet apartment looking out over the city lights. I didn't feel joy. Not yet. I just felt still. The calm before the storm. That night, I slept for 8 straight hours for the first time in a year. The next morning, I dressed carefully. A dark charcoal suit, a silk shell, and the diamond earrings Richard had given me for our 15th anniversary. A final OU. I wasn't a shareholder anymore, but I had a press pass, courtesy of a favor from Sarah. I sat in the back row of the massive ballroom. It was packed. The mood was electric. Richard walked onto the stage to a standing ovation. He was beaming, his teeth white, his tan perfect. He looked every bit the master of the universe. He raised his hands, soaking it in. He started his speech. "Today, we are not just a company, we are a legacy." He spoke about vision. He spoke about the future. He spoke about synergy with Atlas Holdings. And then, in the middle of his triumphant pause, a man in a dark suit walked onto the stage from the wings and handed him a piece of paper. Richard frowned. He looked at the paper.
I watched his face. I watched the blood drain from it. I watched the confidence shatter. He looked up, confused, scanning the crowd. In the front row, Marcus Thorne and the entire Atlas delegation stood up as one and began to walk out. A low murmur started in the room. Phones buzzed. A Wall Street Journal reporter suddenly got a notification and his eyes went wide. Richard tapped the microphone. "There seems to be a misunderstanding." But it was too late. The dam had broken. A notification hit my own phone, a press release from Atlas Holdings. Atlas Holdings withdraws from Vance Global merger amidst significant financial irregularities and SEC investigation. The room erupted. Richard staggered at the podium, looking at the retreating backs of the Atlas team. He looked small, old. He saw me. I was standing in the back row. Our eyes met across the chaos, across the wreckage of his life. I didn't smile. I just looked at him. I let him see the woman he had created, the worn-out woman who had just erased his legacy. He knew. I turned and walked out of the ballroom as his world caved in. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. It was a corporate bloodbath. Vance Global's stock didn't just fall, it evaporated. It was delisted by the end of the week. The SEC froze Richard's assets. The board he had stacked with his golfing buddies turned on him instantly, firing him for cause in a desperate, futile attempt to save themselves. The press, who had been celebrating him 24 hours earlier, now feasted on his carcass. "Vance Global, a house of cards," screamed one headline. "From CEO to zero," screamed another. And then they found out about Chloe. The scandal became personal. The story of the faithful, brilliant wife discarded for a younger model just before her husband's empire, an empire she helped build, was revealed to be a fraud. I became, overnight, a media sensation, but not in the way Richard had been. I was the ashqueen, the woman who walked from the wreckage. I gave one and only one interview. I sat down with the most respected female financial journalist in the country. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. "I am not a victim," I said, looking directly into the camera. "I am a strategist. My husband made a bad business decision. He underestimated his chief asset. Any woman who has ever run a household, managed a family budget, or navigated complex social structures while being told she's not in the workforce is a strategist. He just forgot who he was dealing with." The response was overwhelming. My story resonated with thousands of women, the 45-plus crowd, the invisible women, the ones who had been worn out by giving their lives to others. They saw my victory as their own. If you've ever felt like your best years were behind you, only to realize you were just getting started, you would understand the wave of support I received. My consulting firm, the one I had started with a simple business card, was flooded with inquiries, not just from people wanting to know the dirt, but from companies, serious companies. They wanted the brain that had seen the Vance Global fraud. They wanted the strategist who had engineered the Atlas maneuver. My first client was Atlas Holdings. Marcus Thorne hired me to help them vet future acquisitions. It was the most lucrative and most ironic contract of my life.
Sarah, of course, stayed at Atlas as their head of compliance. We had dinner every Friday. And Richard? His legal battles were just beginning. The SEC was the least of his worries.
A class action lawsuit from shareholders was demanding everything he had left. The divorce, which he had initiated, was now his worst nightmare. Maria, my lawyer, was brutal. "He has no assets left to hide, Eliza. The SEC found them all. He's trying to declare bankruptcy, but the fraud charges mean the court won't discharge his debts." He lost the penthouse. He lost his collection of vintage cars. He lost his reputation. Chloe, predictably, left him the moment the Amex Black Card was declined. The final meeting for our divorce settlement took place not in a fancy lawyer's office, but in a sterile, fluorescent-lit conference room at the courthouse. He was already there when I walked in. I hadn't seen him in person since the shareholder meeting. The man sitting at the table was unrecognizable. His expensive suit hung off him. His face was gray, sallow. The cocky, arrogant titan was gone. He looked broken. He looked up as I entered. There was no fire in his eyes, no anger, just a deep, pathetic exhaustion. "Eliza," he rasped. I just nodded, taking my seat. "Richard." Maria handled everything. It was a simple signing. He was agreeing to the terms. There was nothing to divide. I was keeping my apartment, my company. He was keeping his debts. As we were gathering our papers, he spoke. "Why?" he whispered, looking at his hands. "Was it all for this? To destroy me? You could have just taken the settlement." I paused at the door. I turned back to him. "You seem to be under the impression that this was about you, Richard. You think I did this for revenge against you?" He looked confused. "What else was it? You told me I was worn out. You told me my 15 years of work were domestic. You didn't just leave me, you erased me. You tried to make me nothing." I adjusted the lapel of my suit. "This wasn't revenge, Richard. This was a market correction. You were an overvalued asset. I simply exposed the truth. The world did the rest." I walked out of that room and didn't look back. That was 12 months ago. Today, I am not Elizabeth Vance. I am E. Vance. My firm has offices in New York, London, and Singapore. I am the woman CEOs call when they really need to know if a deal is solid. I am 49 years old, and I have never been more powerful, more visible, or more myself. My story became a symbol that it is never, ever too late to reclaim your life. It's never too late to show the world what you are made of. And that's why I'm here. Because my story is over, but yours might be just beginning. This is the end of my public statement. The rest is off the record. But I know what you're thinking. Was it worth it? The answer is complicated. This brings us to the doorbell. It rang exactly 12 months after that disastrous shareholder meeting, 12 months to the day. I wasn't expecting anyone. My assistant had gone home. I was reviewing a hostile takeover defense for a client in Tokyo. I opened the door. He was standing there. Richard. But it wasn't the Richard from the courtroom. It wasn't the CEO. This man was thin, wearing ill-fitting clothes. He was holding a small, crumpled paper bag. He didn't recognize me, not for a full 30 seconds. He looked at my silver hair, my face, which was no longer etched with stress but with confidence, and the sharp, modern lines of my home. Eliza? He stammered. My God! What do you want, Richard? I saw your interview, he said, gesturing vaguely. I live nearby, in a room. He was a broken man, and in that moment, I felt nothing. Not pity, not anger. Not even the cold satisfaction of victory. Just emptiness. The fire had burned out, leaving only ash. You look good, he said. It was a pathetic attempt at his old charm. I am good, I replied. What do you want? He flinched. He held up the paper bag. I brought you this. Do you remember? The bakery in Brooklyn? The almond croissants. You always loved them. He was offering me a pastry. The man who had taken 15 years of my life and tried to leave me with nothing was offering me a $2 croissant as a peace offering. I stared at the bag. And that's when it hit me. The real end of the story. The real revenge wasn't the SEC. It wasn't the public humiliation. It wasn't even taking his company. The real revenge was this. It was me, standing in the doorway of my multi-million-dollar life. And him, a ghost, trying to buy his way back into my memory for the price of baked goods. The real revenge was that he needed me to still be the old Eliza, so he could feel forgiven. And I wasn't. I don't eat those anymore, Richard, I said. I closed the door. I went back to my desk, picked up my pen, and got back to work. I closed the door. The sound of the high-end deadbolt sliding into place was finite. It was the last punctuation mark on a 15-year sentence. I leaned my forehead against the cool, solid wood for a single beat. The crumpled paper bag with the almond croissant was on the other side of that door, along with the ghost of the man I had spent a year destroying. I had expected to feel a surge of triumph, a spike of adrenaline, a final satisfying burst of, I won. Instead, what I felt was quiet. If you have ever finished a long, grueling project, a marathon, or perhaps the most difficult chapter of your entire life, you know that silence. It's the deafening sound of, what now? The fire that had fueled me for 12 solid months, the rage, the humiliation, the white-hot need for justice had burned itself out because its fuel was gone. Richard wasn't the Titan anymore. He was just a sad man with a pastry. My revenge was complete. The satisfaction was real, but it was colder, more sterile than I had imagined. It wasn't the passionate inferno I had expected. It was the sharp, clean satisfaction of a perfectly executed business plan. A problem identified, a strategy implemented, a result achieved. I walked away from the door into my living room. The city lights glittered below, a carpet of diamonds that I had earned. I was 49 years old. My husband was gone. My company was thriving. I was, by every metric, a success. And I was completely, utterly, terrifyingly alone. But the alone of today was different from the alone I felt a year ago in that penthouse. That was the loneliness of abandonment. This was the solitude of sovereignty. The next morning, I walked into my office. E. Vance Strategic Consulting now occupied the 34th floor of the New World Trade Center. The view was breathtaking. My team, a curated group of 20 brilliant, hungry analysts, mostly women, many over 40, all overlooked by their previous employers, was already deep at work. Sarah Jenkins had recommended most of them. My new life wasn't just about destroying Richard's legacy, it was about building my own. And my legacy would be built on competence, not charm. "Good morning, Miss Vance," my assistant, a razor-sharp woman named Diane, said as I passed. "Morning, Diane. What's the agenda?" "The board from Omnicorp is in conference room A. They're early. And," she paused, "Mr. Harrison seems skeptical." "Skeptical is my baseline, Diane. Coffee black."
I walked into the conference room. 4 men in gray suits stared at me. The fifth, Frank Harrison, the 68-year-old founder of Omnicorp, didn't stand. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice a low grumble. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "I'll be honest. My board insisted on this meeting. I read your press. You're a demolitions expert. My company needs a renovation, not a wrecking ball." He was calling me the ashqueen, the woman who burns men down. The media had loved that narrative. I sat at the head of the table. I didn't open my laptop. I just looked at him. "Mr. Harrison, you read the gossip. You clearly didn't read my analysis. Your company isn't the problem. Your chief operating officer is. He's running the same playbook Richard Vance did, inflating divisional value by burying operational debt and logistics. It's sloppy, and you're letting him do it because he reminds you of yourself 30 years ago." The room went tomb silent. One of the younger board members choked on his water. Harrison's face went purple. "Now you listen here." "No, you listen," I said, my voice cutting through the tension, calm and lethal. "I didn't burn Vance Global down because I was a scorned wife. I exposed it because it was a house of cards built on bad data. The fact that my husband was the one holding the match was incidental." I leaned forward. "It's amazing how many people will look at a strong, competent woman and still try to find the emotional reason for her actions. You didn't hire me despite what I did to Richard Vance. You hired me because of it. You hired me because you know I will find the truth no matter how inconvenient it is." I looked at each board member. "Your company is bleeding. I am the surgeon. You can let me operate or you can bleed out. Your choice." Frank Harrison stared at me. The silence stretched. Then, for the first time, he smiled, a dry, cracking sound. "All right, surgeon, show us where to cut." The next 3 months were a blur of 18-hour days, but this was a different kind of work. The work I did against Richard was fueled by acid. This was fueled by focus. I dove into Omnicorp's financials. I interviewed executives, shipping managers, and analysts. I found the core of the rot. Not just the COO, but an entire culture of boys' club back-scratching that was killing innovation. The old me would have presented the data and let the men handle it. The new me, I did things differently. I didn't just identify the problem. I presented the solution. And the solution was a 42-year-old woman named Mira Tandon, the head of their Midwest logistics, whom the male executives had repeatedly dismissed as not a team player because she refused to join their golf games. She was the one who had been sending memos about the operational debt for 2 years, all of which had been ignored. In the final board meeting, I didn't just recommend firing the COO. I recommended promoting Mira to his position.
She's the only one who saw the iceberg, gentlemen, I concluded. It's time you put her in the captain's chair. They did. 3 months later, Omnicorp posted its first profitable quarter in 2 years. Frank Harrison sent me a single bottle of scotch. It cost more than my first car. The victory felt purer. This was the happiness I'd been looking for. It wasn't the fleeting, bitter spike of revenge. It was the deep, resonant satisfaction of building something strong, of achieving. That Friday, I met Sarah for our weekly dinner. We were at a quiet, absurdly expensive restaurant that I could now easily afford. "To Mira Tondon," Sarah said, raising her glass. "To Mira," I smiled, clinking her glass. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? The fix-it part, more than the burn-it part." The burning was a necessity. It was pest control. But this is gardening. I'm pulling the weeds and finding the flowers they were choking. Sarah nodded, taking a sip. "The ashqueen is planting a garden. The press would have a field day. The press doesn't know who I am. They, like Richard, only saw the caricature. They don't see the work." And that was the truth. True success isn't just about winning your own battle. It's about using that victory to lift up the people who deserve to win theirs. That is a feeling no one can take from you. As we were leaving, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a photo. It was Richard. He was standing on a sidewalk outside a fast food restaurant, wearing a dirty parka. He looked gaunt, haunted. The photo was clearly taken from across the street. Below the photo, a single line of text. "He looks worn out, doesn't he?" A cold dread, a feeling I hadn't felt in over a year, snaked down my spine. I looked at the number. I didn't recognize it. "Eliza?" Sarah asked, seeing my face. "What is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I don't know," I whispered, staring at the screen. The revenge was over. I had won. I had moved on. But the text message was a chilling reminder. When you become the Ash Queen, when you burn down an empire, you don't just create victims, you create enemies. Richard was pathetic. He was nothing. But the men who had benefited from his empire, the board members I'd humiliated, the executives I'd exposed, the COO I just had fired, they weren't nothing. I had closed the door on my past, but what if my past wasn't finished with me? My happiness was real, my achievements were solid, but I realized, standing on that sidewalk, that my fight for survival wasn't over. It was just entering a new, more dangerous phase. The Ash Queen had built a kingdom. Now, she would have to defend it. "Eliza, what is it?" Sarah's voice pulled me back from the brink. The festive lights of the restaurant blurred, and the cold dread on my neck solidified. I showed her the phone. She read the text. "He looks worn out, doesn't he?" And her professional mask snapped into place. The friendly dinner companion was gone, replaced by the head of compliance for Atlas Holdings. "Give me the number," she said, pulling out her own phone. "I have a contact in our internal security division. We'll trace the burner." "It's not Richard," I said, the realization hitting me with absolute certainty. "He's not capable of this. He's too beaten. This is a taunt. This is from someone who enjoys the game." "It's from someone who lost," Sarah said grimly, typing. "And you've made a lot of men lose a lot of money this year, Eliza. The Vance Global Board, the COO from Omnicorp." We got into my car, the warmth of the restaurant forgotten. The silence was heavy. I had spent a year as the hunter. I had never considered what it would feel like to be the prey. Anyone who has ever made a bold move, a life-changing decision that disrupts the status quo,
knows that you don't just get applause, you also get targets on your back. They're trying to scare me, I said, more to myself than to Sarah. They're trying to make me feel like he felt. Powerless, watched, pathetic. Is it working? She asked. I thought for a moment. The fear was real, a cold knot in my stomach, but beneath it, something else was stirring, a cold, familiar anger. No, I said, my voice hard. It's not working. It's just making me focused. I dropped her off and went not to my apartment, but to my office. The ashqueen had burned an empire with strategy, but E. Vance, the CEO, had to protect one. This wasn't a job for lawyers. This was a job for specialists. By 2 a.m., I was sitting in my glass-walled office with a man named Kaido. He ran the most exclusive and most expensive cybersecurity and private intelligence firm in the city. He was the man corporations called when they didn't want to call the police. Ms. Vance, he said, sipping the water my assistant had left for him. He was impeccably dressed, and his eyes seemed to absorb all the light in the room. You have an admirer. I have an enemy, I corrected. Often the same thing, he mused. They're using a daisy-chain series of encrypted burners, amateur but loud, designed to be found, eventually. They want you to know you're being watched. This isn't an assassination attempt, Ms. Vance. It's psychological warfare. Who? Give me 48 hours. Kaido was true to his word. 48 hours later, he was back in my office. He placed 3 tablets on my desk. Each one showed a face. The man on the left is Arthur Davies, the former COO of Omnicorp, the man you had fired. I know him.
The 2 on the right are Paul Hemmings and Mark Stahl, both former senior VPs at Vance Global. Both were forced out after the Atlas merger collapsed. Both lost their stock options, their pensions, and most importantly, their golden parachutes when the SEC investigation proved they had knowledge of Richard's fraud. It all clicked into place. This wasn't just one disgruntled executive. It was a small conspiracy of better, humiliated men. They've been meeting, Kaido continued, swiping to a new screen. A steakhouse downtown. They're pooling what little resources they have left. They blame you, not Richard, not their own complicity, you, for their downfall. So they're taking pictures of my ex-husband outside a McDonald's? I asked, the absurdity mixing with the anger. What's their endgame? To dismantle your reputation, Kaido said. They can't touch you legally. You're clean. But they can restart the ashqueen narrative. They can paint you as an unstable, vindictive woman who destroys lives for sport. They're preparing to leak a dossier to the press, full of half-truths and outright lies, claiming your audit of Omnicorp was a personal vendetta. They want to poison your client pool. They want to make you radioactive. This was the attack. Not a physical threat, but a reputational one. In my line of work, reputation was everything. It was the one currency that truly mattered. The old me would have fought this alone. The old me would have dug up dirt, leaked it, and engaged in the same back-alley warfare they were. But I wasn't the old me anymore. I wasn't just a strategist. I was a CEO, and I had allies. I looked at Kaido. Keep watching them. Document everything. I want a file on their meetings, their finances, their dossier. I want to know what they're eating for breakfast. Consider it done, he said. Now, as he was leaving, I said, get me Frank Harrison. The 68-year-old founder of Omnicorp picked up on the second ring. Vance, it's 6 a.m. This had better be good. It's about Arthur Davies and 2 of Richard's old lieutenants. They're planning to discredit the Omnicorp audit. They're planning to discredit me. And by extension, they're planning to discredit your board's decision to hire me and promote Mira Tandon. There was silence on the line. I could hear him breathing. They're calling you unstable, I said. And they're calling your new COO, the one who just posted your first profit in 2 years, my puppet. They are feeding this to the Financial Times. Son of a... Harrison's voice was low and suddenly very, very awake. Where are you? My office. Stay there. I'm sending my car. 1 hour later, I was in Frank Harrison's penthouse study. It was old world, all mahogany and leather. He was in a dressing gown, a phone to his ear, pacing. No, that's not what I'm saying, John. I'm saying you need to look into Paul Hemmings. Yes, that one. He's been hiding assets from his Vance Global bankruptcy filing. I know. Yes, it would be a shame if the SEC found out about that offshore account. Exactly. Good talking to you. He hung up and dialed another number. Marcus, he barked. It was Marcus Thorne. It's Frank Harrison. We have a mutual friend and a mutual pest problem. Turns out a few of Richard Vance's old rats didn't drown with the ship. Yes, Mark Stahl. I'm told he's been violating his non-compete and his separation agreement with you. Yes, Atlas. I agree. A strongly worded letter from your legal team seems appropriate. I sat there, sipping the coffee his housekeeper had brought me, and I watched him work. This was power. It wasn't the chaotic, emotional, fiery explosion of my revenge. This was cold. It was fast. It was a network of influence built over decades being activated like a weapons system. He hung up the final call and looked at me. Arthur Davies, he said, was just offered a consulting gig with a competitor in Chicago. I own a majority stake in that competitor. I just had that offer rescinded. I also suggested to their CEO that hiring Davies would be unwise for our future business relationship. He sat down, satisfied. It's done. Just like that? Just like that. Men like that, Harrison said, are cowards, Elisa. They're bullies. They only attack when they think you're alone. You have to show them you're not. He leaned back, studying me. You did good work for me. You saved my company. You found Mira. You think I'm going to let a few failed, bitter men undo that? Bad for business. I nodded, a feeling of profound gratitude and, for the first time, of genuine safety washing over me. Thank you, Frank. Don't thank me, he grumbled. Just keep finding the rot. That's what you're good at. Now get out of here. I need a proper breakfast. I walked out of his building as the sun was rising over New York. The ashqueen had fought her battle alone, but E. Vance, the CEO, had an army. The fallout was swift. Kaido's team reported that Davies, Hemmings, and Stahl met one last time. It was a short, frantic meeting at a coffee shop. Davies, having lost his last professional lifeline, was furious. Hemmings had received the audit notice from the SEC. Stahl had been served with a lawsuit from Atlas Holdings for breach of contract. Their little conspiracy, their dossier, their entire campaign of psychological warfare had evaporated in less than 3 hours. Kaido sent me one last photo. It was Arthur Davies yelling into his phone on a street corner, looking, well, he looked worn out. I deleted the photo. I deleted Kaido's number. It was over. That evening, I didn't go to the office. I didn't work. I went home. I poured a glass of wine and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment. The city was spread out before me, a kingdom of light. For a year, I had been fueled by a single-minded, burning desire for revenge. I had achieved it. I had taken the man who told me I was worn out and turned him into a ghost. But that victory, I realized, had been hollow. It was an ending. It wasn't a life. The last few days, this was a life. The satisfaction I felt now was different. It wasn't the bitter, cold ash taste of revenge. It was the deep, warm, resonant thrum of achievement, of building something, of protecting it.
I had taken the worst moment of my life, the moment of my deepest humiliation, and I had used it as fuel to forge a new one. I had built a company. I had put talented women in positions of power. I had earned the respect of men like Frank Harrison. I had created a life where I was not the plus one, not the domestic help, but the principal, the one who makes the calls. I was 49 years old. I was not the ashqueen. That was a name they gave me. I was E. Vance, and my reign was just beginning. My story is one of betrayal and revenge, yes, but that's not the moral. The moral is what comes after the fire. The real victory isn't burning down the old life that hurt you. The real victory is having the courage to build a new one, a better one, from the ashes. It's never too late to pick up the pieces and build an empire. So, let me ask you, what are you building from your own ashes?